Crazy things happen, though, right? We've all seen unbelievable things, things that don't seem to make sense. They're hard to believe, but yet we do believe because we've seen them. We have faith in them or something like that. And today we're going to hear about Jesus encouraging a man to just believe. That phrase is going to come up. Don't be afraid, just believe will be a phrase we're going to hear in a little bit. Others may not, given the situation this guy is in. Others may not believe in situations we're in. But the point is, we believe, even if it seems impossible. So simply today, remember to believe in the unbelievable with Jesus. Believe in the unbelievable with Jesus. So what we're going to do today is pick up the story. Actually, where we left off a couple weeks ago, if you were with us last week, we started what was called the Markan sandwich, as I called it, as it's been called. So where Mark starts a story, then tells it another one, and then finishes the first one. So today we're going to hit kind of the bookends or the bread, the bun of the sandwich. So we're going to jump back to Mark 5, verse 21 to start today. It's where we left off a few weeks ago. So we'll start Mark 5, verse 21 through the first part of 24. It's bookmarked on the Bibles in your tables. Chris will have it right there behind me. You can follow along, phone, tablets, computers, all great. I'll be in the NIV translation as usual. So here we go. Mark 5, starting at verse 21. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. We'll stop there. All right, so if we think back a few weeks, Jesus had gone over to the other side of the lake. He had healed a man that was demon-possessed. He was in that region called the Decapolis, where it's a very Gentile region. At the end of that story, he gets back on the boat to come back. So now he is back across to that first side of the lake, a very Jewish side of the lake, where people would have been aware of him, known about his miracles, known about his healing. So that's where he is. And we're picking it up, and we enter a man named Jairus, who is one of our main characters today. Jairus is a synagogue leader in town. He's not a Pharisee or one that does the teaching in the synagogue, but think of the synagogue admin. He does a lot of preparations, makes sure there's supplies, gets everything ready for the worship services. So it's a respected profession. He would have been known to the people in his community. In his context, would have been fairly well off for his community. We don't know what his view of Jesus would have been. He was certainly aware of Jesus and his healing and the miracles that were going on. Don't know if he shared the view of some of the Pharisees that were very skeptical or upset. But in either case, he comes to Jesus and falls at his feet. This is a move of desperation. This would be unbecoming of somebody with social status like Jairus, but to actually fall at his feet. Social status hierarchy was a massive deal in this context and community. So he does this, and he does it because his daughter is very ill to the point where she's on her deathbed. We don't know what she is sick with, but we know it is that dire. Jairus asked Jesus to come, lay his hands on his daughter so she will be healed. Whatever view of Jesus Jairus has, he is putting it down because he somewhere believes that Jesus can heal his daughter. And Jesus doesn't actually say anything. He just goes with Jairus. He just goes. And so does the crowd. Now, we're going to pick up the story in a minute, but I want you to, for a second, put yourself in Jairus' mind for a minute, because what we're hitting here now is the middle part of the story we talked about last week. So Jairus has just asked Jesus all of this stuff. Jesus is going with him, and now they're going through a massive crowd, and Jesus stops because the woman had touched his robe. The woman had touched him and was healed, so he stops to talk to her. Now, we know why he did it. But Jairus has to be thinking, man, my daughter's on her deathbed. This is time sensitive. You're going with me, and you stop for this woman? From a society perspective, this woman would have been down here while Jairus would have been up here. But Jesus still stopped. So hold that in your mind, and what might have been going through your mind as time seems to stop, where Jesus went at his pace, because we're going to come back to that in a little bit. All right, so that's kind of what's going on. So we had Jairus ask for help for his daughter. Then we hit that middle part of the story where Jesus is healed because that woman touched his cloak. Now we'll finish up with Jairus. Mark 5:35 to 43. It says, while Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told him, don't be afraid, just believe. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, why all this commotion and wailing? The child's not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went into where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, Talita cum, which means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Immediately the girl stood up, began to walk around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. All right, so Jesus finishes talking to the woman that's been healed, and some people from Jairus' house show up. They come with the terrible news that his daughter has died. And they say to Jairus, don't bother Jesus anymore. It's not worth it. She's gone. But Jesus hears all this, and he looks at Jairus and says some of the most important words of this passage. Don't be afraid, just believe. Don't be afraid, just believe. Jesus is different. He's saying, I don't operate like the world. Right? He didn't pick this woman over the daughter of Jairus. He's like, just believe in me. And Jairus does, and they keep going. And somehow as they go, they separate from the crowd. And he only takes Peter, James, and John from his disciples with him. They are known to be kind of that inner three, even of the 12, so we'll hear more about them throughout this series as well. So they show up at the house, and there are a lot of people crying and wailing and mourning there. The thing is, at this time, it was customary you actually hired professional mourners when there was a death. So people were hired to do this, to come and cry and wail, and there was usually even a flute player. This was customary. It helped with the grieving process. One belief was that if there were other people mourning, it helped other people let it out. Also, grief and mourning was very ritualistic. So this happened. So there are people there that are maybe don't really know the family, but are paid to be there to help mourn and cry and wail. So Jesus gets there and he's like, what's going on here? Like, why are you guys mourning, being all loud? The girl isn't dead. She's just asleep. She's just asleep. Jesus is foreshadowing that she's going to wake up. And this is not taken kindly to by these hired mourners. They kind of feel like, hey, Jesus is like interrupting our job and our work, and they laugh at him, probably in a scornful and sarcastic way. And Jesus sees this, he hears it, but eventually sends them away. So they all go, he clears the house. We're left with just Jesus, his 3 disciples, Jairus and his wife, and the little girl. And they go into the room, and Jesus says, little girl, I say to you, get up. And Mark uses in here, he uses the Aramaic phrase, which would have been the natural language of the area, to show Jesus is right there using the words in the culture of the day. Jesus spoke Aramaic. He speaks it to the girl, and she gets up, and she walks. She just gets up and she walks. And Jesus has 2 orders to finish this up. He says, don't tell anyone, and give her something to eat. Don't tell anyone plays into the idea that Jesus wants everything of his revelation to be on his timing. It doesn't come too soon. It comes on his timing. The only place people were allowed to talk about him and what he did was a few weeks ago in the Decapolis in that Gentile region. So he's like, nobody gets to know what happened, not yet. And then he's like, give her something to eat. More evidence that she is fully alive. She has the basic needs of being hungry. She's also restored to the care of her family. So I want us to think about this interaction with Jairus and Jesus and those words, don't be afraid, just believe. How do we do this? How do we believe in Jesus doing something unbelievable? First thing I want us to see is that we should ask like Jairus. Go to Jesus like Jairus. He goes for his daughter. It's not about him. Jairus goes to Jesus for somebody else. And at face value, this might be the easy part. Somebody has a need or decision or anything, and we go to Jesus for him. We pray about it, say our quick prayer, and that's fine. It's done, right? It's almost like a box was checked. And that's fine. Just praying for them is fine. But look at Jairus. He doesn't just do that. He fell at the feet of Jesus and pleaded. Humility, desperation, submission. He is giving 100% of himself to Jesus for his daughter. Do you give 100% of yourself to Jesus for someone else because you want him to give 100% back in that relationship? There's an anecdote about this, about 2 kids, and about giving everything in a relationship. So there's 2 kids playing together, it goes. There's a boy and a girl. And the boy has a bunch of marbles. And the girl has a bunch of pieces of candy. So the boy says to the girl, I will give you all my marbles if you give me all your candy. Now, it doesn't sound like an even trade to us, marbles for candy, but they agree. They're going to make this trade. But here's the thing. The boy holds back his biggest and best marble, while the girl gives all her pieces of candy. So that night, the girl sleeps soundly, peacefully. She's great. Sleeps like nothing. But the boy is restless. And he's restless because he's wondering if the girl held back her best piece of candy just like he held back his marble. So the moral of the story for this part is give everything to the relationship, to not wonder if somebody else is also giving everything in it as well. This applies with Jesus. We give everything to Jesus. We don't hold back. We give 100% because we want him to give 100%. We don't want Jesus to hold back. In the back of our mind, we know he won't, but we give everything. So giving 100% to Jesus for someone else starts with laying down whatever view we have of ourselves, whatever view somebody else might have of us. See, Jairus had a level of status and respectability in his community, but he laid that down to come and be at the feet of Jesus. So if you're someone that usually figures everything out, solves the problem, you're the fixer, right? You're the boss, the supervisor, you have some clout. Put that aside when coming to Jesus for someone else, because you can't figure it out on your own. You can't fix it for him, but you know and believe that Jesus can. Then on the other side, if you feel like you're the perpetual failure, the mess maker, the screw up, lowest on the ladder, lay that down too. That's a thing of pride as well. And approach Jesus believing he can and will help you through, help this person, even though you can't usually fix things, because he's strong enough and powerful to do it. The idea is to get outside of ourselves and approach Jesus with that level of respect and humility, that level that he deserves. So we ask like Jairus, and then we kneel and plead with him. We get humble before God. James 4:10 says, humble yourselves before the Lord. He will lift you up. This is a hard one, right? Because we might think, I don't plead, I don't beg, I don't do that. But it shouldn't be that mindset with Jesus. We should come and plead. I will encourage you this week and challenge you to actually pray for somebody, but do it and actually get on your knees. Let the emotion and the authenticity and everything come out when you do that. It will hit different for you. And Jesus sees the passion of your heart. Like, I tend to pray from the comfort of my own recliner. I'm sitting there in the morning, the legs are up, I'm popped back, the coffee's hot next to me. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And I pray, but that's out of comfort. I think it's time to get uncomfortable for ourselves and pray for somebody from that place, because it means that much, and we believe in Jesus. Get on your knees in desperation, humility, and submission, and pray to the one who is more powerful, and the one that hears. So it shows Jesus how badly you want something for someone else. So get humble before Jesus. Next part is to trust Jesus' pace. Trust the pace of Jesus. See, Jesus starts by going with Jairus. However, as he heads through town, heads through the crowd, he stops to speak with the woman. This urgent need, this time-sensitive need, somebody's on their deathbed and he stops. What? He stops, but he doesn't stop working. It's at his pace. Think about going at somebody else's pace, trying to keep up with somebody's pace. I have run 2 half marathons in my life. They were 10 years ago now. And what they did back then is they had pace runners. So they had people that would actually hold a flag while they ran with, 2 hours, hour 50, hour 40, hour 30, about what time you wanted to finish in. It was before GPS watches were quite as common as they are now. So I would try to keep pace with the 2-hour guy, trying to run a 2-hour half marathon. I never made it. 2:05 was my best one. But you would try to keep up with somebody else's pace. Now flip it. Think about wanting to go at a pace and somebody not keeping up with yours. I deal with this with my kids. I'm like, let's go. We got to move. We got to go. And they don't want to quite keep at my pace. We all like to go at our own pace, right? Many of us like to go at our pace. Some of us move at quick paces all the time. Some of us are much slower. That's okay. But it's hard to go at the pace of someone else when it doesn't match up with how we want to go. Jesus moves at his pace, but it is not at the expense of us. If we feel like he's going slower or faster, it's not at our own expense. See, Jesus isn't confined by the same time constraints we are. He's not worried about logging his 10,000 steps like some of us are. It doesn't matter. So think about seeing Jesus, and he's starting to move in your life for a minute, right? This is good. Things are going. We're getting somewhere. God's on the move. Then he stops, or it feels like he stops, right? Life gets stalled or stagnant. But then at that same time, you see him move in the life of somebody else. He's doing something for somebody else. And it's easy to think that God forgot about us, or he's done with us, or we're not important enough to God. Jesus didn't forget about us. He doesn't love someone else more than us. So when it feels like Jesus stops and is working in somebody else, challenge yourself to be encouraged by that, not discouraged. See Jesus' movement in somebody else's life. Don't ignore it. Be encouraged by it. Because know that he works in your life too. That grace, love, care, compassion that you see him exercising in somebody else's life is available and will come to you too. It's just done on Jesus' timing. So be joyful when God works in the lives of others. It shows how active he still is. He is not forgetting about you or putting somebody else over you. Acts 10:34-35. So then Peter began to speak. I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism, but accepts from every nation the one who fears him and does what is right. Peter is shown here, he's had a vision at this point, that God didn't play favorites with like the Jews in Israel over the Gentiles. Faith and fear of the Lord are what matter to Jesus, and that's it. Same for us. There are no favorites. When it seems like you're waiting on God while he's working in somebody else, it's not him playing favorites. In the waiting, stay faithful and trusting. Don't stop seeing God in the waiting. Don't stop praying in the waiting. Don't stop following Jesus in the waiting. Waiting isn't wasting time. See it as growing time, growth in your patience in God, growth in your faith that God will come through, growth in your love of others because you see God on the move in them. Don't focus so much on what you want or expect God to do. Instead, focus on who you know God to be, the God that loves, cares, and provides and never leaves because God doesn't play favorites. Trust in the pace of God. And then embrace the naysayers. The hired mourners mocked Jesus when he got to the house. What do you mean she's just asleep? You're crazy. She's dead. Everybody knows this. That's the general mindset or the attitude the people at the house had. They had no trust, no belief. They laughed, and they mocked Jesus. Naysayers, right? The people that say, that'll never work. Never work. So why are people like this? Kind of looked up, like, why do we have people that are so negative or naysayers and all those kind of things? And what the internet tells me is this. There's a few things that lead people to be naysayers. Personal pessimism, fear of failure, lack of trust in new ideas, desire to protect from disappointment, or they see problems as insurmountable. I would guess most of us don't like naysayers in our lives. Now, sometimes you can use it as motivation and get yourself going. I get that. But in general, they're hard to deal with on anything. But think about naysayers, about your belief in Jesus specifically, about your faith. And they can come, what I would say, indirectly and directly. Indirectly, maybe you read or hear on social media or in the news or just in a crowd you overhear it. It's not directed straight at you, but you kind of still hear it. This is the one I deal with probably the most. Not around a ton of non-Christians that would say anything about that to my face, but I hear it on social media or through the news. And it's hard to not get discouraged or angry or defensive or in the real rough times be like, man, could they be right? Or then maybe it's directly, kind of like the mourners in our story. They laughed right in the face of Jesus. Someone laughs or mocks you because of your belief. Someone says something hurtful about your faith, or someone just completely opposes it. I'd love to say naysayers don't exist, either directly or indirectly, but the fact is they do. So what do we do with the naysayers? When I first wrote this section earlier this week, I had titled it, Ignore the Naysayers. And then as I was working later in the week, Jesus was like, that's not the play. We're not going to ignore. Embrace. Embrace the naysayers. That came. See, Jesus sent the mourners away, but he didn't pretend they didn't exist. He knew they were there. He just didn't let it discourage him. So how do we embrace those naysayers? The first one is realize they exist. People don't believe what we believe, and some people will push against it. What? How dare people don't agree with me or think like me, right? But they do. They have different beliefs and views, so we realize they exist. And then we stand strong but don't attack. We're not swayed by the naysayers, but we don't demean them or knock them back down. We keep praying, we keep believing in the faith that we have. Maybe you have a conversation with someone that is opposing it. Maybe you just need to take a little breather from the news or social media. Do what you need to do to stay focused on Jesus and what he's done for you and is still doing. So let the naysayers actually strengthen you rather than knock you down. And then pray for them. Pray for them. If they're already talking about God even negatively or in disbelief, there's something on their hearts about him. So pray that God would take that feeling or that passion and turn it towards him instead of in opposition. So we embrace the naysayers while still standing strong. And then finally, we're going to feel the touch of Jesus. Jesus took the little girl by the hand and told her to get up. His soft words told her to get up. His gentle touch of her hand showed he was present. The touch of Jesus, it came physically and in his words, but it was soft and gentle, almost small, but had this big, big impact. I talk often about how I like to cook, and I was thinking this week about how many ingredients I use that you don't use a lot of, but they drastically can change what you're making. Or think about salt. It does not take a lot of salt to season and make a dish taste good. Vanilla extract, just a little bit, sweetens up your whole batch of cookies. Really good. Spicy peppers, just a little bit of a spicy pepper brightens up a dish, doesn't even make it spicy. Or then some type of acid like vinegar or citrus fruits. That's one of my favorites to use. It's a little squeeze of lime over it. It's really nice. Don't overdo it, just a little gentle bit. It's so nice. Jesus' touch is often really gentle. His words are often a whisper. It's soft and gentle, but with big impact. Now, that's not to say God won't do something big and loud. Of course, that's possible. But pay attention to the soft and gentle. Listen to how the prophet Elijah felt the presence of God in 1 Kings. 1 Kings 19:11-13. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart, shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire. The Lord was not in the fire. After the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face, went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. That whisper of Jesus can make a whirlwind of difference. The difference can be in your life or in the life of somebody that you prayed for. The whisper that says you can get up. Here's my hand to help you get up. You might want to stay down. Everything around you might tell you to stay down. You might still hurt. It might hurt to get up. You might be afraid that you or someone else is just going to get knocked right back down when you get up. But that whisper and gentle touch and the hand tells you it's okay. It's time. You can get up. Jesus is there. He's present. He's right there with you, and you feel it. He didn't leave. He didn't forget. Nobody got lost in the crowd. It's just time now. It's time, so we respond. And we respond because we get up and we get something to eat. But it's not like the sandwich we talked about last week. We're going to talk spiritual food, metaphorically, right? Spiritual food that will help you work back to that full strength in Jesus. Here comes those spiritual disciplines we've talked about many times. Bible reading, prayer, fasting, solitude, all of these things help you stay close to Jesus and strengthen in Jesus. Stay close to him when he helps you up. Don't get up and forget the one who gave you their hand. Don't eat and forget who fed you. It's Jesus. And that gentle touch and soft whisper, it got you up, it'll hold you and sustain you. We just have to pay attention to it. See, Jesus cleared the house of all the mourners and the wailers and the noise. It was a distraction. It wasn't necessary. They weren't helpful. Sometimes we need to clear the noise in our lives, clear the distractions. Then we can really experience that gentle touch and soft whisper of Jesus that makes a massive impact on our lives. And it does. We just might not always realize it today. So my encouragement as we wrap up is to don't stop believing. Believe in that unbelief. Don't stop believing. This involves asking, like Jairus, when someone has a need, be humble. Get on your knees and pray to Jesus for them. Give everything 100% to Jesus. And trust his pace. It may go faster than we feel like we're capable of going. It may go slower than we want to go. He may seem to stop when we're like, no, we got to keep moving. But we trust his pace because we're never forgotten about. And then embrace the naysayers. Belief in Jesus will unfortunately come with people that oppose it. That's just the reality of life. Realize it exists. Stand on your belief. Stay strong in it. And then pray for those that push back. Pray for them. And then feel that touch of Jesus, that soft touch, that gentle whisper, because it's so important and it has so much impact. So believe. Keep your belief even if what you need to believe in seems unbelievable. Let's pray. God, I thank you for this morning. God, I thank you for the faith of Jairus that we heard about, that he was willing to go to Jesus, to fall on his knees and to plead with him for his daughter. That level of faith, that belief that Jesus could heal, the willingness to humble himself. So God, I thank you that we can see that example. And God, I ask that we would pray in that way, that we would really humble ourselves before you. We come and fall at your feet, God, and realize to lay everything else down for you. And God, that in your answer, you move at the speed you move and how you move. I pray that we would trust that. We would see you even when it feels like it's going too fast or slow. Or that when you're working in others' lives, God, we know you're not done with us, but we can be encouraged by what you're doing with others. And God, I pray that we would be strong up against the ones that maybe push back or that oppose you, don't share our beliefs, God. And I pray that instead of fighting back, we would stand strong and pray for them. God, just pray for those people that they would somehow hear your voice and feel your touch as well. And God, then that we would be aware of your touch and your whisper. We'd clear the noise, clear the crowds from our own lives, and just pay attention to you. And that you're there to help us get up when it's time. Even if we're scared, even if we're nervous, or feel like we're not ready, God, but that your hand and your voice helps us and makes that impact, God. So we thank you again. In your name.